Yeah.
Hey, David, thanks for joining. I appreciate you taking the time. So, if you don't mind, just give our audience maybe 15 seconds on who David Aronoff is.
Okay, thanks, Raj. It's great. It's great to do this. Thanks for asking. So I'm David Aronoff, and I'm a general partner at Flybridge Capital Partners. We're an early stage venture firm with offices in Boston and New York. And I've been investing in early stage companies as a VC for about 17 years, which is kind of scary to say. And prior to that, I was an entrepreneur and on the development side with a bachelor and master's in computer science. And my big focus is on kind of enterprise and infrastructure. And so the whole notion of the reinvention of the stack and how cloud and mobile and open source and open APIs and big data all kind of munge together to change the whole compute infrastructure and the different opportunities that creates for innovative companies to take advantage of it.
Cool. And I know you have a little bit of security background, so we've talked about that in the past too. So you don't want to forget about that, right?
Yeah, I was at my master's in computer science. The emphasis was on computer security back in the Stone Ages, and I spent time in federal systems at Bell Labs developing secure networks that I can't talk about even to this day because it's classified. And I've invested in a bunch of security companies over the years and still think that there's, even though it's super confusing and there's just tons of companies out there, probably too many, I think that the problem keeps getting bigger and bigger. And with the advent of this whole cloud and mobile stuff, I think that just creates even more problems related to securing infrastructure.
Yep. Well, I think we're all in agreement there. So first question for you for today. So I know you only got a few minutes, but we wanted to get some of your perspective. So tell me, is DevOps for real or is it a fad? What's your perspective? Tell me why, which one it is.
So I think it's evolving, but I don't think it's a fad. And the reason why is exactly some of the stuff I said in my preamble. I feel that we've hit this next era of computing. It's this massive inflection point, and I just don't think there's any going back. And so even though all the answers aren't there yet, it's not like we're going to revert to the monolith where everything is kind of we've given up hosting and we've given up the idea of compound applications that are services built upon disparate companies putting them together. And in a world where you cobble together, and I don't mean that in kind of a negative way, but you really piece together the best in breed services to build services that are either bespoke for a company or commercial services on top of them. The role of development and the role of operations have blurred. And I think that doesn't change because we only see more of this going on in the future. And it's, in the whole notion of kind of continuous development and continuous integration is the notion of continuous operations. And so I think that the responsibility of someone who does development is no longer just handing it off to someone on the operation side. They intimately have to understand how these things work and how users are going to use them.
Okay. So, that makes sense. So the question is, we in the DevOps community, what can we learn from sort of previous markets? If we got to work together, what sort of markets have you seen in the past that would be good for the DevOps community to learn from? Are there sort of any patterns that you see?
I think that it's a really interesting question, and I guess that I think there are probably some lessons or some benchmarks to look at from the past, and then I think this will be totally unique because the boundaries have all been blown apart. So the first thing is that I think that whenever there is an inflection point change in a platform, there are a bunch of tools and support and systems that worked in kind of the old paradigm that just no longer work in the new paradigm. And there's another class of tools and systems and support that just need to be adjusted to the new paradigm that roughly can work, but they need some tweaking here and there. And so I think that, and then maybe there's a third class, which is to say there's entirely new things and problems that need to be solved that weren't imagined in the past. And so as a venture guy investing in this, those are the three categories that I'm looking at. And the first and the third, which are, so let's take security as an example. That's, security in a monolith or a, a data center realm is very, very different than in kind of, let's just call it a DevOps realm where the party in a company responsible for security still has all the responsibility that they had in the past for making sure that their organization or their application is secure and adheres to whatever industry or federal regulations there might be. But unlike the guy at name your favorite large bank, Bank of America, who could literally walk into the data center and lock down a server or install a new firewall box in that rack, all of a sudden, if you've got some stuff living at Amazon and some stuff living at Software, and maybe you're using an application from Workday, that security guy still has all the same responsibilities. They have no authority over that infrastructure.
Yep.
So here's an old problem that has to be reimagined in terms of the solution. And then maybe on the other end of the scale, in terms of something that I find super exciting, are the problems or the opportunities that just couldn't be considered in the past in that kind of last paradigm. So, for instance, I don't think we're there yet for a variety of reasons, but we are headed toward, and I believe this is the case, toward the commoditization of, say, storage units and computes. And so right now, there's a variety of reasons why it's hard to transition in real time. A lot of it has to do with the bandwidth of the internet, and FedEx is still faster than Verizon Fios, for very large file transfers. Actually, I'm not sure. I haven't seen the data on this, but for years, a carrier pigeon was faster than the internet. You could tie a memory stick to it. So there's still some things that are holding it back. But if you think about where we're headed, I'm a real big believer in brokered services. And so the idea that at some point there will be this API layer, universal API layer, on top of computes or on top of storage. And so the idea that we might have a commodity exchange, a real-time commodity exchange, not just for ownership or rental of computes, but for the transference of computes or storage, is kind of mind-boggling. And I'm not sure that that's 2 years away or 5 years away or 10 years away, but I think it's going to happen. And those are, so some of the opportunities that we see with companies are what needs to be done today to help prepare for that future.
Cool. So you mentioned security and you mentioned sort of storage as two opportunities. One of the questions I had for you is, outside of the companies you've already invested in, give me 3 concrete areas that you're like super interested in and say, gosh, there's got to be an opportunity here. And we won't hold you in investing in it, but tell me what's on your mind. Like what are the 3 areas in sort of this DevOps world that you say, if I found something there, I'd be pretty excited?
So you and I had talked about this in a previous conversation. I'm really interested, and I have not invested yet, in the potential for these new containerization strategies like Docker.
Yep.
The idea that there wouldn't be this chasm between development, test, side of things, and then moving into deployment at scale. And I think there are a lot of underlying issues from an infrastructure standpoint that provide challenges. Anytime you add an encapsulation layer on anything, that adds latency. And so even though bandwidth's getting faster, memory's getting cheaper and faster, you still add some latency, and there are unintended consequences. So that's something, I think to contend with some other issues. But that's something I find very, very interesting. I would say that, there's something in, there's a few areas. I want to be careful that I don't, kind of give away, not so much state secrets from our standpoint, but what companies are doing. In the DevOps side, there is a company that I've seen recently that's focused on more training and education around DevOps, which, so raising the question, does there become some sort of a universal certification? Like if you think the way that there's, certified Cisco engineers or Microsoft certification, is there a certificate program around DevOps? We're seeing some things, and I'm spending a lot of time at NYU and at Columbia, and understand that the more modern programs in computer science are really embracing the notion of a DevOps world. But I do think this question about who's certified to be a DevOps, other than just a badge of honor that they wear from having done it for a while. I'm not sure that's a huge venture opportunity per se, but I wonder if that's going to be every company's got to have the training, like you think about MongoDB, shameless plug there for one of our companies, but you think about the way MongoDB has Mongo University, where all these new technologies have it. That's very different than thinking about kind of the day-to-day
Yep.
Of a DevOps guy. So I think there's opportunity around education and information.
Yeah, no, I think, and that's obviously something that I know you've talked to Alan at DevOps.com. He's probably going to be very interested in, taking a look at that opportunity.
Yeah, and I think there's a great opportunity for a third party to do it, and then how you leverage that, I think becomes really, really critical. So that's probably it. And then, this, I still think, this whole idea of provisioning and deprovisioning kind of across stacks and up and down stacks becomes a really difficult and compounded problem. When you think about the number. One of the great things about this new environment we live in is that really innovative and provocative companies are encouraging their dev teams to think about using the latest and greatest technologies and to choose the things that work, as opposed to kind of the past where you just kind of really just focused on this is the CMS we're using, or this is the language we're using, or the platform we're using, and you see the proliferation of all these different platforms, kind of best in breed for the task at hand. I think that's awesome, but then the coordination of all these things, and whether it's provisioning or deprovisioning of applications across these different platforms or of users, I think it's probably part of the security and administration area, but I think it becomes very, very convoluted because there's no, unlike, say, you think about cloud apps and you think about like either Google Apps or Microsoft O365, they're trying to create this kind of universal authentication layer. And they can do it because Microsoft and Google just, drive so much in the industry. You think about Okta doing it for those apps as an independent third party at kind of that application layer. At the infrastructure layer, this idea doesn't really exist yet, kind of across the industry, and I think that could be interesting too.
Cool. So last question. I know you're short on time, and we'll let you go after this. But give us, in a minute, you were once in the sort of day-to-day IT world too. What's your advice around DevOps with IT folks? I mean, they're going to be looking at this video and saying, gosh, what can I do over the next few years, and what's your advice to them?
So I think it's all around building community. I think the great part about a developing ecosystem is the opportunity to share, and I think that we're in an environment right now where that sharing is promoted, it's expected, maybe it's even demanded, and so I think the way that we get better and create situations and ecosystems that will scale, kind of is simply by craft sharing. I think there's a lot of fluidity right now in DevOps, because it's still so nascent. Most of the companies that are driving the innovative aspects are very, very small companies, and the technical operations within very large companies are looking to our innovative, 10 and 20 person or 3-person companies for help in understanding, what that impact might be, even though they may not embrace, kind of a DevOps approach for a few years. So I think it's a really interesting time where there are going to be great opportunities to craft share, to build community, leverage something like DevOps.com to help promote that. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm excited about what you guys are doing, because I think that it could become a linchpin to helping, promote understanding and kind of the best practices.
Great. All right, David, thank you very much. I appreciate the time. And
my pleasure.
We will definitely talk to you soon.
Cool. Thanks, Raj.